The world is witnessing one of the fastest military expansions in modern history as China scales up its missile research, production and deployment streak. A recent examination reveals that the country appears to be reshaping the strategic balance in the Indo-Pacific and perhaps beyond. In the view of one senior expert, we identified and located 136 facilities linked to China's rocket force, which oversees both nuclear and conventional missiles. That figure is staggering and, when paired with another observation, reveals the speed of change. More than half of these sites have expanded, several of them replacing whole villages growing by tens of thousands of feet in just 5 years. These are not incremental tweaks. This is a national-scale shift. Analysts found research institutes, factories, bases and testing sites, many located outside traditional defense zones, emerging amid farmland and former villages. Satellite imagery shows complexes once hidden, now sprouting. Vast new halls, hardened bunkers and transport links. Chinese state security machinery may prefer discretion, yet the evidence is clear. Military-industrial capacity is scaling. As one commentator put it, despite Beijing's repeated denials, military experts say that this is China bringing in a new arms race across the country. Among the most striking figures since 2020, China has added at least 21 million square feet of research and production floor space dedicated to its rocket capabilities, roughly the size of 375 football fields. That addition includes new factories, expanded test ranges, and missile component assembly plants. The strategic logic is unmistakable. Bigger means more missiles, faster production, greater reach. At a coastal site, a rocket factory can be seen with missiles over 60 feet long, freight trains moving rockets from one end of the yard to the other, and roofs deliberately camouflaged. These visual glimpses mirror the quantitative pace of expansion. Then there is the hardware. In a September military parade, China flaunted weapons, including an upgraded version of the missile known in Western defense circles as the Guam Killer, the DF-26. As one analyst warned, missiles for strategic dominance, for deterring the United States and possibly defeating the United States. The stakes could not be clearer. The ability of a missile to threaten U.S. Palm Nord, setting fear territory in the Pacific, uplifts the signal China is sending. Guam, with its U.S. Air Force bases, is a potential target. The logic runs, if Chinese missiles can reach forward-deployed U.S. assets and carriers, American forward presence is challenged, deterrence is tested. It matters because in a previous independent study, the U.S. burned through roughly 25% of its air defense interceptors in just a dozen days. If the Chinese missile build-out turns operational, then the sheer volume and diversity of launchers may overwhelm layered defense systems, disrupt war plans, and pose uncomfortable questions of readiness. This is not just about more missiles, it is about different missiles. The upgrades visible in the parade. For instance, the DF-26D variant, described by analysts as incorporating active radar seekers, countermeasures, and possibly hypersonic glide warheads, suggests that the power projection paradigm may be shifting. The missile drift from theater warfare to strategic dominance is underway. China's rocket force expansion is being pursued at pace, and visibly so. By redefining the missile industrial base, increasing mobile launch capabilities, and extending range and precision, Beijing is changing the geometry of what constitutes offensive and deterrent power. What does this mean for the United States and its allies? First, the forward-deployed posture of U.S. forces across the first and second island chains in East Asia may become more vulnerable. If missiles threaten Guam, carrier strike groups and allied bases, then the U.S. must reassess both the force structure and reinforcement timelines. Second, missile defenses are being tested not just technically, but in terms of resilience, capacity, and saturation. If China maintains a production surge, a scenario of mass launch might force the U.S. to consume interceptors at unprecedented rates or face degraded defensive efficiency. Third, escalation risks rise. Dual-capable missiles blur conventional nuclear thresholds. Mobile launchers harden, complicate targeting. The strategic cushion may shrink and miscalculation may become more likely. Fourth, arms racing dynamics accelerate. If China is sprinting ahead in missile output, then regional and global powers will respond. More hypersonics, more layered cruise missile defenses, more submarine-launched strike. The production curve matters. Is it fair to say that this is an arms race? I would say it's not only fair to say that it's an arms race, but China has already sprinted off the starting. That judgment underscores how the issue is not just size, but tempo. From Beijing's perspective, these developments advances anti-access, area denial, a 2AD posture, shore up deterrence and signal capability across the first and second island chains. For Washington, Tokyo, Canberra and other regional capitals, this is a wake-up call. The missile umbrella, once assumed stable, is now shifting, but this is not yet a fait accompli. Several caveats persist. Operational readiness of all new facilities and missiles remains opaque. Sustainment, logistics, warhead numbers, command and control, and credibility under crisis are separate challenges. US defense analysts caution that public displays of hardware may mask developmental dependencies. Still, power projection is the intent. China is no longer just fielding missiles at the fringes. It is expanding the entire missile ecosystem with research, production, training and deployment at a tempo not seen for decades. That industrial scale build-out transforms what missile force means, from siloed brigade to multi-site network, from single target range to saturation threat, from regional denial to global reach. In this context, US policy responses such as the Pacific Deterrence Initiative take on heightened urgency. The United States is accelerating investment in forward basing, missile defense integration, hypersonic weapons, and allied cooperation. The strategic competition is evolving from platform types to volume, speed, and industrial depth. For regional allies like Japan, Australia, South Korea, and the Philippines, the calculus is complicated. Their security guarantees, host nation bases and reinforcement corridors may need re-examination. The question is not just whether US forces can intervene, but how smoothly, how quickly, and at what cost. In the immediate term, one can expect more geographic dispersion of US assets, greater cooperation on missile defense. Networks, for example, layered interceptors, space sensors, allied air defense coordination, and possibly more preemptive signaling of deterrence. At the same time, China may continue to highlight its new missile infrastructure as both deterrent and bargaining chip. Ultimately, the recent disclosures point to a shift in the architecture of power, where once air and sea platforms were dominant, now missile production and reach may matter even more. The industrial base factories, test ranges, transport links becomes weaponized. In that sense, the missile race is no longer purely about warheads, but about how many, how fast, how mobile. That is why the imagery of new facilities replacing villages, expanding tens of thousands of feet in 5 years matters. It reveals a strategic mindset: build capacity, disperse launchers, complicate targeting, outpace the adversary. For decision makers in Washington and allied capitals, time is now of the essence. Investment cycles, once measured in decades, may now require years. The margin for surprise is narrowing, deterrence is more fragile, and escalation thresholds may move inward. In the coming decade, the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific may hinge less on aircraft carriers and more on missile factories, mobile launchers, and hardened bunkers. The landscape is changing. The race has entered a new phase.